Hello there friends and welcome. Today I want to get started on a new series of videos all about Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. A pretty fun cRPG, especially gameplay wise, with quite a lot of content. And while it's also not new, I think the release was like 4 years ago or so, I realized there isn't really much up-to-date content about the final version, so patch 5.0. And before getting into builds, I want to start with the best spells overall for each class. So first I want to cover all of the best Cypher spells. Cypher is actually one of the most unique class in the game and certainly very powerful, so let's give it a go. When it comes to even your power level 1 spells, as a Cypher, you already have some pretty powerful abilities. Honestly, to me the best one overall is Soul Shock, not only because it is basically your main area of effect, power until Amplified Wave, which comes way later on. It's very easy to cast. You basically cast it at a target and then all of the enemies surrounding them will get hit. And it's also enemy only, so your allies will be safe. Anyways, the damage is quite good and it does scale wonderfully even at the end game. The base penetration is quite decent, perfect for enemies with high armor, but also don't forget that the damage type is Shock, which is the easiest damage type to hit. The big armor rating enemies like golems or constructs usually have very low electricity resistance. As you can see, the damage can be quite powerful at the early game, and it also targets Reflex, which is by far the lowest saving throw of all of the enemies. Overall, a very solid spell. For my second choice, we have Whisper of Treason, which basically lets you charm any enemy. Charmed enemies will turn to your side, and although they cannot use abilities, they'll still provide at the very least distractions for the other enemies to hit. Basically, what I don't enjoy about Whisper of Treason is that, well, first, the range is rather low, like the yellow circle around us, so you have to be pretty close to the enemy. Second, when you cast it, let's target the young Drake here, who is the strongest enemy. The Drake is now charmed. Unfortunately, you cannot actually control the enemy with just charm. But anyways, what I don't like is that notice the icon flipped to green, as the Drake is now an ally instead of the red for enemies. Because of this, when you use effects that only target enemies, you will not be able to hit the charmed foe. I find this quite often messes up my strategy of surrounding the tank with enemies and then spamming area of effect abilities, since the charmed enemy won't be hit by it. Now when it comes to power level 2, we also have two very strong choices. The first one is Mind Blades. First, look at how fast the casting time is, half a second base. Most importantly, this is the ultimate spell for dealing with 2 to 3 enemies. It won't really work if you have more enemies than that, because the beauty of this spell is that it will hit the main target and then jump to other targets. If you only have 2 to 3 enemies left, it will keep bouncing back and forth between them for massive amounts of damage. Ideally, you don't want more than 3 enemies. 2 would be the best for maximum damage, otherwise you'll just do too much split damage between the enemies. Second, we have the ever so useful Recall Agony. It targets the enemy's will, which isn't that high often, but most importantly, it makes the target suffer 30% of received damage after casting as raw damage for quite a long time. This is the perfect spell for enemies like bosses or other single tough foes. The more damage you inflict to the enemy after, no matter the source, from other characters and so on, the more damage over time they'll suffer because of Recall Agony, pretty much sealing their fate and ensuring they die fast. Remember, this is raw damage, so there isn't really much of resistance against it. Now when it comes to power level 3, first we have Puppet Master. If you like to charm and dominate enemies, then this is the way to go. The range is actually double that of Whisper of Treason, so you can hit enemies that are far away. For another great level 3 spell, we have Secret Horrors. It casts very fast, has pretty decent range and area of effect as well. Basically, all of the enemies surrounding your main target and the target itself will be frightened and also sickened. Sicken reduces their constitution and healing, so less fortitude and hit points as well. And Frightened prevents them from using hostile abilities, which is great. The only issue I have with this spell is that, well, eventually, wizards will be able to learn Enervating Terror, which is that except way better, as it's terrified instead of frightened, which completely blocks the enemy from taking any action other than running sometimes. So it is a spell that I would respect out eventually. Now lastly we have Ectopsychic Echo. This creates a beam between one of your allies and then your Cypher, so the beam would hit between, let's say, Ender and our Cypher here. just like this, and it hits enemies only. The problem is, I find the targeting to be a bit annoying because, like I said before, it only hits the enemies between your target and your Cypher, but I suppose you can also keep your Cypher moving around. For your power level 4 spells, well, there's a few choices here. Pain Block is one of the most useful ones for when you first get it, because it can apply the robust inspiration to any character. This is most likely going to be your tank, as the extra regeneration effect and hit point is very strong at keeping anyone alive. Plus the casting time is super fast too. If you have a druid, they can just cast Nature's Balm instead for robust to pretty much your entire party instead of a single target, as this has an area of effects surrounding your caster. We also have Silent Scream, which is your second main area of effect spell. However, the damage is extremely low, even though it is raw, and the casting time also huge. I wouldn't really recommend this. I'd much rather go with Soul Shock early on for when you have many enemies, or just Mind Blaze when you have a few left. Mind Lance is also a bit tricky in my opinion, because, well, even though it targets Will, which is great for Cyphers, as they can easily get critical hits with Will, the targeting itself is somewhat annoying because it's a straight line. Kinda hard to hit multiple enemies with this, and it does have friendly fire as well. Lastly, we have Body Attunement, your first spell that can steal armor rating from the enemies and grant it to you. Once again, I think this spell is somewhat outclassed. I'd much rather just cast the Wizard Expose Vulnerabilities, as it is an area of effect spell that can hit a lot of enemies, also reduces their armor rating and deflection, plus it targets Will, which is a lot easier to hit than Fortitude usually. As far as level 5 Cypher spells, they are mostly disappointing with an exception: Borrowed Instinct. This is one of the best buffs in the entire game, and it also has a built-in debuffing effect. When you cast it at the enemy, and the casting time is super fast, it grants your Cypher a plus 20 bonus to accuracy, which is huge. Mind you, Devotions for the Faithful, the other main accuracy buff, is only half that effect. They won't stack together, however. Borrowed Instinct will replace Devotions as far as the accuracy bonus. Anyways, it also grants you plus 20 to all defenses, which is massive, including deflection. Lastly, the debuff part reduces the enemy's intellect and also perception. Now, if you like the Charm and Dominate Cypher route, then you probably also want Ringleader, which is an area of effect version of those. But like I said, I don't like how this messes up your area of effect abilities, especially the full only ones. Now let's at last cover our level 6 spells, and trust me, this level is super stacked. First we have Amplified Wave, which will be your main Cypher area of effect ability as soon as you get it. The area of effect is actually massive. Just take a look at this, you pretty much always hit everything on the screen. The damage can be very high as well, certainly more than 100 damage when you consider critical hits. Lastly, this will not only deal damage, but also knock all of the enemies hit by it down, which basically wastes their turn as they will get up. Although the prone effect doesn't last that long, you can just keep on spamming this to keep the enemy's perma knocked down. By just spamming this ability, you can easily handle everything, just take a look. Lastly, we have the ultimate damage over time spell for single targets, especially bosses, Disintegration. Any enemy that you cast this on is basically marked for death, and ideally you want to first cast Recall Agony and then Disintegrate to really enhance the damage the enemy will take. For example, let us cast it at the Memory Hoarder boss. So now we already have a 137 hit, now another, and it will keep on ticking until the enemy dies, really, with Recall Agony enhancing everything. There really is no point to casting Disintegrate twice, because the effect will just refresh. And that was it, it was disintegrated. Also, don't worry because you'll still be able to loot the enemy. Now when it comes to power level 7 spells, you really only have a single one that's useful, but on the other hand, this spell is one of the strongest buffs in the entire game, and what makes the Cypher class so unique: Ancestor's Memory. The main benefit is that it gives the ultimate Intelligence Inspiration Brilliant to any ally, besides the Cypher themselves. Now this is the buff that lets you basically loop all your beneficial effects for an infinite amount of time, by combining it with the Salvation of Time Priest's spell. Let's first have Shoti use Salvation of Time, which is area of effect, so basically covers your entire party. Our Ascendant status is at 28 seconds, and we also have Nature's Balm for 13. By using this, notice how all of our buffs got a bonus in duration. So now let's cast Ancestor's Memory on Shoti to give her Brilliant. Notice she already regained a level 4 spell. That's what Brilliant does, it lets your character regain either an ability or a spell of any level, including level 8 and level 9 spells, every few seconds for its entire duration. But of course, now she has another level 5 spell for free, we cast Salvation of Thyme again, so we are never running out of Ascendant or any other buff really. And now she already got another 6 locked back, so package Salvation of Thyme when needed. It really lets you loop everything. As for level 8 spells, you truly only have a single amazing one, but on the other hand, just like level 7 with Ancestor's Memory, it is truly absolutely powerful. Thyme Parasite. The main beauty about Thyme Parasite is that it actually stacks, so notice the area of effect is the target and then it can actually jump to other targets based on your cipher power level. For the enemies they'll just be hit once. However, although the area of effect for the jump is somewhat low, so don't expect it to jump to all of the enemies even if they are close together. The maximum should be around 5, which gives you an absurd buff to your action speed. We have 125% extra action speed. And because of this, basically you'll be casting a spell in 1 second, and then by just waiting 1.5 seconds, you'll be able to spam it again and again. This is for the longer casting spells. For the faster ones, you'll still retain this 1 second casting time, but your recovery can become even lower than 1 second, and the casting time itself almost instant. So yeah, overall, this is the spell that makes pure ciphers ever so much more powerful than multiclassed. As for the last spell level, level 9, there's really one spell here that really stands out to me, and it is Driving Echoes. The casting time is super low, but most importantly, it increases the penetration of any ally besides the cipher by a massive +8. This is truly a huge amount. I don't think anything else comes close. For example, let's take the ultimate area of effect druid spell, Great Maelstrom. I have 15 penetration here. Through Driving Echoes, I now have 21, which is more than enough to ensure this spell will penetrate the armor of any enemy for full damage and even double damage, depending on how low their armor rating is. This also works for physical attacks, so overall an amazing buff. Lastly, we have Death of 1,000 Cuts. I find this spell to be a bit overkill, especially because you only have a few level 9 points to spare in abilities. It's basically similar to Disintegration, except it's lower damage, and it does combo with shred spells like Disintegration or Antipathetic Field. So whenever the enemy is hit with one of these shred spells, it will proc Death of 1,000 Cuts for extra damage. Like I said, I think it's a bit of an overkill. Usually Disintegration with Recall Agony is more than enough. Well friends, so this was it for my first Deadfire video. My next one is 100% going to be my favorite build and class in the game, Cypher Ascendant, with more to come of course. As usual, please remember to like and subscribe if you can to help the channel grow. Thank you for watching and see you next time.